Hello, boys and girls, and welcome to the concession stand here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and this is the review of the new supernatural horror sequel to the 2021 film The Black Phone, amply titled Black Phone 2. This film, once again, is directed by Scott Derrickson. It once again stars Ethan Hawke, Mason Times, and Madeline McGraw. This film is set in 1982, 4 years after the events of the first film, where we find Finn is trying to deal with the trauma from being kidnapped and killing his kidnapper, the grabber. And meanwhile, his psychic sister Gwen starts having terrifying visions of mutilated children and nightmares with the phone ringing. This was a highly anticipated sequel for me because I was a huge fan of the first film. It really caught me off guard. The Black Phone was one of those sleepers in 2021. I really was caught off guard, which I shouldn't have been because I'm also a huge fan of Scott Derrickson. His films have really, I can't point to a bad Scott Derrickson film. This going back to the exorcism of Emily Rose, Sinister, um, Deliver Us from Evil. Uh, even that remake, what was The Day the Earth stood Still, with Keanu Reeves. I enjoyed that. And then his little foray into Marvel films when he directed Doctor Strange, which is still one of my favorite Marvel films to this day. And then we get this, a sequel to a film that nobody was really checking for, Even though I enjoyed The Black Phone, I, I, I thought it was over and done with. I felt that story wrapped up really well. A really good movie, really good story, and it ended on a really good note. Nothing was set up for a sequel per se, but hey, I'll take it. And I will say I'm a little disappointed with Black Phone 2. I think Black Phone 2 went in a direction that I wasn't expecting for one, but that's fine. You want to go to the movies and be surprised, but this went in a direction that really made no sense. Now, with all that being said, I did like the story. It just tried to do too much, I felt. The first story, the first film, I should say, was pretty contained, pretty grounded. You had elements of supernatural elements that were in that film, but nothing that overdrew it. You could still base that in a real world scenario, and this movie went full supernatural. And I guess if you've seen the first film, I'm not going to spoil anything if you haven't seen it, but I guess you had to go supernatural, but you really didn't, for the story that they were telling here. But I don't know, man. It just didn't quite get there with me. Now, I did enjoy the performances. All the performances were great. I did like the direction, and the atmosphere was very chilling, no pun intended. It was a frightening looking movie, and it was some very scary moments in this film. And I guess if you go to see a horror film, that's what you want, and you get that. That, like I said, Scott Derrickson, he knows how to direct horror. The movie was directed well, I felt, but it's it's just certain elements in this movie that I don't know, just didn't line up with the rules that were set in the first movie. And now this movie mainly is centered around Gwen, the sister here, played by Madeline McGraw, whereas the focal point of the first film, Finn, who's played by Mason Times, uh, he took a back seat here, and I didn't realize. It took me to the middle of the movie to realize who Mason Times is, because I'm like, man, I just saw him in something. He was from the first film. Obviously, he aged a lot, but I'm like, man, this doesn't. I don't know, man. Something about his face. Was he in a Marvel movie or something? I don't know. What was it? And then finally, it was a scene in here where he was acting his behind off in the phone booth, and it just clicked. Wait, that's Hiccup. That's Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon, the live action film that came out a couple of months ago. Like, oh, that's him. No wonder. Okay, now I'm on board. But he takes a back seat in this film, and they focus on the sister, which smart move. I liked Madeline's performance here. I liked her character, Gwen, in this film, and that made sense story wise. But her power set, and yes, power set is like borderline Scarlet Witch in this movie. I mean, she is all powerful in this film. Now, what I did enjoy, it isn't doom and gloom. Like, I enjoyed elements of this movie, and they had some really good elements. This is a real throwback or an homage to throwback horror films from that time period that this film is set in, the early 80s. We get some Friday the 13th throwback callbacks, if you will. You get some Nightmare on Elm, a very heavy Nightmare on Elm Street in this film. So it pays homage to those films, and I greatly appreciated that because I love those films. And so to kind of add those elements to this story made the story work. My problem was it wasn't enough of it. We got a couple of scenes of that, and I'm like, oh man, this is going to be some Freddy Krueger type stuff here, some Jason Voorhees level of violence here, but not necessarily. We didn't get that. There's a lot of gore in this movie, but there aren't any deaths that I can think of. I mean, not in present time, not in the present storyline that's being told here, and that's a little upsetting. Yeah, I know it comes off as being evil, to make statements like that, but I mean, the stakes needed to be raised here, and they really weren't raised to a level where I can feel some dread from our antagonist in this film. Speaking of the antagonist of this film, to hop back to the negative side, it is not Ethan Hawke's problem, because Ethan Hawke does great. He was fantastic in the first film, and in this movie, he takes a backseat to a degree. It's not enough of him, and that wouldn't have been a problem if he wasn't killing it, no pun intended, in the scenes that he was in. And we just got so little of him. And I wanted to see more. I wanted him to mess with these kids more, but we didn't get a lot. But nevertheless, it is a fun little movie. It definitely doesn't live up to the prestige of the first film, but it is watchable. But I'm slightly disappointed by the movie. I wish it was. It felt like it was a good idea there, but by the end, it just didn't satisfy. It just didn't quench that thirst for me, set by that first film in this franchise. Black Phone 2 gets a letter grade of a C-. Yeah, I was hoping for more there. I was hoping that we got just, an unleashed supernatural force that is wreaking havoc everywhere it went, but it didn't quite get there. But that's just my opinion. I would love to know yours. Did you check out Black Phone 2? Do you plan to check out Black Phone 2? And did you enjoy the first Black Phone? I would love to know your thoughts. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also search for this show on all social media platforms. Just search for the KB Radio Network. Don't forget about YouTube. Subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel and like this video if you don't mind. Don't forget about the 5 stars the reviews and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to the concession stand here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this review of Black Phone 2. Want you all to know that I love you, continue to love everyone, and until we speak again, you all be blessed.